She said she needed space. She didn't say it was my bed she needed. When Amanda told me she needed a break, it landed with the softness of a falling feather and the weight of a sledgehammer. Not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was quiet, deliberate. She didn't cry, she didn't fidget, she didn't even look at me for more than 3 seconds at a time. She sat across from me at our small kitchen table, the same one we bought off Craigslist 3 years ago after moving in together, and she said it like she was canceling a magazine subscription. "I just need to figure out what I want," she said, stirring her coffee, even though the sugar had already dissolved. At that point, I should have known. Maybe some part of me did. But let me rewind. Amanda and I had been together for 4.5 years. We met at a mutual friend's wedding, cliché, I know, where she wore a green dress that matched the wine stain she accidentally got on it. She laughed it off, barefoot by the end of the night, and danced like she didn't care who was watching. That version of her, the playful, unpredictable, magnetic Amanda, was the one I fell for. We moved in together after a year and a half, not because of a proposal, but because it made sense. Rent in Chicago wasn't cheap, and splitting it made everything easier. So did having someone to cook with, someone to share laundry duty and inside jokes and silent Saturday mornings with. Our relationship wasn't fireworks and drama, and I always thought that was a good thing. It was calm, comforting. She liked podcasts about cults and true crime. I preferred baseball radio and old blues records. We met in the middle on documentaries and diner food. It worked. Until it didn't. Looking back, there was no thunderclap. Just little things. She stopped kissing me goodbye when she left for work. Said it was because she was running late, but it happened even when she wasn't. She started staying out later than usual, saying her coworkers liked to unwind after deadlines. Said they needed her energy to keep things from getting too corporate. She stopped laughing at my jokes, even the ones she used to roll her eyes out and then grin after. You notice those absences, even if you pretend you don't. Then one morning, she said the words, "I need space." And I, being the calm, supposedly mature man I pride myself on being, nodded. I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I didn't even ask for a reason. I just watched her twist the ring on her finger and place it neatly next to her coffee mug, like it was something she borrowed and no longer needed. She didn't pack everything, just a duffel bag and her makeup case. She didn't take her books, her hair straightener, her extra chargers, or even her favorite pair of worn-out jeans. Her closet was still full. Half of the drawers in the dresser were untouched. Her shampoo still sat in the shower caddy next to mine, and she left a note on the fridge about the groceries she'd bought. "Be back to grab the rest," it read. No date, no explanation. Just that. That was 2 weeks ago. At first, I tried to convince myself it was temporary, that she needed to clear her head, maybe visit her sister, maybe go stay with one of her friends from work. But the silence started to stretch, and the longer it did, the more I noticed something. She wasn't gone, not really. She had physically removed herself, sure, but she'd left behind enough pieces to haunt every room. A scarf tossed over the couch, her earring still in the dish by the sink, her coffee mug, that stupid gray one with the chip on the rim, still drying in the dish rack. It felt less like she'd gone on a break and more like she was keeping one foot in the door, like she'd left just enough behind so I wouldn't fully move on, so she could come back when she wanted, if she wanted. And I think that's what bothered me most. She didn't say goodbye. She said, "I need space." And that's exactly what she took. Just not all of it. The first night without her felt eerie. Not because I was crying into my pillow or rereading old text messages. I wasn't. I didn't do any of that. But the apartment felt wrong. Empty in the way a crowded subway feels when the doors close and you realize no one's making eye contact. It's not loneliness, it's disconnection. Familiar objects, familiar smells, but nothing grounding you. Her shampoo still lingered in the bathroom steam, even though she wasn't around to use it. I spent that night folding her laundry, believe it or not, the pile she'd left half done before she said she needed space. Her sweaters still smelled like lavender and dryer sheets. Her socks, mismatched like always, had one fuzzy strand from our cat stuck to the toe. I folded every single piece and placed them neatly in her drawer. A drawer she never came back for. That's when I knew. This wasn't a break. It was the beginning of an ending I hadn't agreed to. But I didn't text her, I didn't call, I didn't beg. I'm not built that way. I went to work, I went to the gym, I bought groceries, and cooked for one. But I didn't touch her side of the bed. I couldn't. And then, about a week in, I noticed the signs. It wasn't her absence that gave her away. It was her lack of presence. The phone call stopped. Amanda was never the type to ghost people. If she needed time, she'd say so. But this time, days passed. No calls, no updates, no check-ins. Her social media went dark too. Not deleted, just paused. Like she didn't want to be found, but still wanted to watch from the sidelines. And I started to wonder, who is she with? Because you don't leave your clothes, your shampoo, and your damn toothbrush in someone's home if you really want space. You do that when you want a soft place to land if things don't work out with the new person you're testing the waters with. You leave pieces behind so the door stays cracked, so the comfort of the life you built doesn't disappear before you decide whether to come back. That thought kept me up that second week. I'd lie in bed and hear every creak of the building settle, every car door slam outside, every distant bark or motorcycle growl made me think, is that her? But it never was. Instead, I found myself walking the apartment like a stranger, not cleaning, not straightening up, just observing. Like I was cataloging the life we had built together, wondering which parts were real and which ones were just placeholders. I remember standing in the doorway of our closet, staring at her side, hangers still full, her favorite jacket still on the hook, the green one she wore when we went apple picking last fall, back when we still held hands and didn't look at each other like burdens. She hadn't even taken her shoes. Why? Why leave everything except yourself? Unless you already have somewhere new to sleep, someone else to laugh with, someone else's couch to crash on, or worse, their bed. But I still didn't accuse. Not yet. That's not my style. I needed more than suspicion. I needed confirmation. And right then, I had nothing but silence, and the familiar scent of lavender. The silence was starting to rot. You'd think I'd get used to it by then. The empty coffee mug still drying, the untouched books on the shelf, the untouched side of the bed. But I didn't. If anything, the quiet started screaming louder with every passing day. And then came the whispers. Not from her. From people who didn't owe me the truth, but offered pieces of it anyway. It started with a mutual friend, Jason. Jason wasn't the kind of guy to get involved. He avoided drama like it was contagious, but he bumped into me at the grocery store and asked, casually, "Hey, everything good with you and Amanda?" I lied. Said we were just taking some time apart. The way people say, "I'm just tired," when they're really unraveling. Jason gave a tight nod and said nothing else, but his eyes held something he didn't want to say out loud. I could see it. That flicker people give when they know something that could hurt you. He hesitated for a second, the kind of pause that begs for an invitation, then said, "Well, she's been hanging around with some new people lately. Saw her at that rooftop bar near Lakeview the other night." That bar. The one she used to mock for being full of finance bros and loud women with fake laughs. Funny how when people change, their taste evolves with them. She looked happy, he added. Different, that's all. Different. I drove home with groceries I didn't need, cans I'd never open, a rotisserie chicken for two that ended up in the trash 3 days later. That night, I scrolled. Not on Amanda's page, she hadn't posted anything. but through our mutuals, our circles, our overlaps. And there it was. A photo from the rooftop bar. Amanda wasn't tagged, but she was in the background, laughing at something, hand on a man's arm I didn't recognize. My heart didn't race. It didn't even sink. It just slowed, like it was preparing to stop for a second and then reorient. I zoomed in. It wasn't anything overt. No kiss, no embrace, just proximity and comfort. The kind you don't share with someone you met 5 minutes ago. The guy was tall, wore one of those untucked dress shirts that screamed mid-level marketing manager. He had the kind of smug face I've learned to distrust. The kind that always ends up thinking he's doing you a favor by sleeping with your girlfriend. Amanda looked light, like she'd shed a weight, like she wasn't in limbo at all. And suddenly, all her stuff left behind in my apartment made sense. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was leverage. A fallback plan. Something to keep me on standby in case her new adventure didn't work out. Like I was her emergency exit. That night, I sat on the couch, lights off, phone screen burning into my face. I didn't text her. I didn't confront her. I didn't even get angry. I just breathed. And for the first time, I didn't feel anxious. I felt focused. There's a special kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone to return and start preparing for what to say when they do. I wasn't chasing anymore. I was watching. And Amanda had no idea the man she walked out on was no longer the man sitting here in the dark. By the third week, I had memorized the silence. It had settled into the apartment like an old tenant, quiet, familiar, and unwilling to leave. The kind of silence you don't notice until you hear it echo against your own breath. I wasn't looking for her anymore, not really. Not in texts, not in phone calls, not even in the alleyways of social media. I'd accepted that whatever version of Amanda once lived in this space, in this life, was either gone or rapidly fading. But her belongings, they still whispered. Her coat was still draped over the hook by the door, the navy one with the tear in the sleeve she never got around to sewing. Her books still lined the shelf above our tiny desk. The self-help titles she claimed were for clients, even though she dog-eared every other page. And the bathroom, it was practically a shrine to her. Hair ties, makeup brushes, a half-used bottle of dry shampoo that still carried the scent of her waking hours. People say when someone leaves, they take everything. Amanda didn't. She left enough to stay in the room without being seen. And that's what got to me. See, if she had just packed up and walked out, like people do in breakups, in real endings, maybe I'd have a clear narrative. But she didn't want closure. She wanted options. She left the story open-ended, like I was a paragraph she might finish later if the mood struck. That's what I told my buddy Miles when I finally broke down and talked to someone. We were sitting in his garage, door open, sipping cheap beer like we were still in our 20s. Miles had known us since the beginning. Double dates, game nights, cookouts. He wasn't the nosy type. That's why I chose him. She left her winter boots, I said. I don't know why that pisses me off so much. He just nodded. Because it means she plans to come back. Exactly. That night, I walked into our closet again. Her side, still cluttered with clothes and shoes and the smell of her laundry detergent, looked untouched. I grabbed a tote bag and started folding. Not angrily, not bitterly, just methodically. Shirts, jeans, the hoodie she stole from me years ago that still had my cologne on it. And that's when I noticed something. Tucked into the back of the closet, behind a stack of sweaters, was a photo. One of us. From a trip to the coast, right before everything started unraveling. We were barefoot on the sand, holding iced coffees, laughing about something I no longer remembered. She had written something on the back. "You keep me grounded. Don't let me float away." And that was the moment it hit me. She'd already floated.
I was the anchor she cut loose, hoping to drift towards something more exciting. But you can't drift forever. Eventually, the tide turns, and I had a sinking feeling she'd come back when it did. The question was, what would I do when she did? By the end of the third week, I stopped checking the door. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I knew, deep down, she wouldn't knock. Amanda wasn't coming back with a grand apology, a suitcase in hand, and some speech about how much she missed me. No. If she came back, it would be casual, quiet, like she'd just stepped out for coffee and forgotten the time. And that's exactly what happened. It was a Thursday evening. I'd just come back from work, dropped my keys into the bowl by the door, and kicked off my boots, when I noticed the faintest scent in the air. Not cooking, not candles. Perfume. Her perfume. That soft jasmine vanilla mix that used to cling to my pillows for hours. The one that lingered in my truck when she rode shotgun. The one that always meant she was nearby. I stood still in the entryway, frozen. Nothing looked disturbed. The lights were off, the air was still, but the scent was undeniable. Faint, like it had brushed through the apartment and then vanished. And then I saw it. The closet door, slightly ajar. I hadn't left it that way. I pulled it open slowly. Some of her clothes were missing. A few hangers now stood empty, rattling gently like wind chimes in a forgotten hallway. She'd come back. She'd come while I was at work. She'd crept in, taken what she needed, and left again, without a word, without warning. No note, no message. Just the ghost of her scent and the sound of an opening, not a closing. I walked through the apartment after that, scanning for more signs. The toothbrush she left behind was gone. The shoes she used to kick off near the door, missing. Even the books on her side of the shelf had been rearranged. She was cleaning house, quietly, bit by bit. And I realized something in that moment. This wasn't indecision. It wasn't a woman torn between two lives. This was strategy. She was keeping the door open just long enough to make sure her next move was secure. And then, when she was ready, really ready, she'd come back, not to explain, but to claim. To see if I was still standing in the same place she left her. She was counting on me being still, patient, predictable. She didn't know I was already miles ahead.
That night, I gathered everything else she hadn't taken. Scarves, hair clips, loose receipts, the spare key she taped under the bathroom sink, and packed them in a cardboard box. I labeled it with a sticky note, Amanda, final pickup, and I placed it near the door. Not out of spite, out of clarity. This was no longer her storage unit, no longer her emotional Airbnb. If she was gonna come back, she wasn't coming back to this version of me. Because I was no longer the man who waited. I was the man preparing for closure. I didn't bring it up to anyone. Not yet. Not to my brother, not to the guys at work, and definitely not to Amanda. But something inside me had shifted. That little whisper that used to say, maybe she just needs time, was now silent, replaced by something sharper, colder. She's seeing someone. I didn't have hard evidence, not yet, but I didn't need a smoking gun to trust my gut. A man knows. You just do. You start reading between the silences, interpreting the delays and replies, the strategically placed break excuses, the sudden disappearances, the purposeful vagueness. People think cheating always looks like lipstick on collars and unfamiliar names on phones, but sometimes it looks like perfume in the hallway, an empty hanger, a playlist she stopped listening to, a bottle of wine she used to share suddenly going untouched. So I did what I hadn't done until then. I looked. Not through her messages, I didn't have access to those, but I remembered her phone's location used to sync with our old Find My app. We hadn't turned off the sharing when she left. I opened it one morning, not really expecting anything. I told myself it was a formality, a way to quiet the thoughts. But
There it was, a consistent address, 3 nights in a row, an apartment complex in Lincoln Park, not near any of her friends, not a relative, not her old coworker's building. I stared at the dot on the map like it was blinking in Morse code, telling me what she wouldn't. That evening, I drove by. Not to confront her, I wasn't ready for that yet, but just to see, to know. I parked across the street, windows down, engine off. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed something concrete. I needed to stop living in a house full of question marks. About 20 minutes in, I saw her. She came out of the building wearing a hoodie that wasn't hers. Too big, too loose, the sleeves dragging over her hands. She looked casual, comfortable. And she wasn't alone. Some guy walked out behind her. Mid-30s maybe, sloppy beard, athletic build, baseball cap low over his eyes. He said something that made her laugh, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. She reached back, playfully touched his chest, and walked ahead of him like they'd done it 100 times before. There was no kiss, no holding hands, but the intimacy was there, thick, unmistakable. And me? I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't pound the steering wheel or yell. I just exhaled, long, deep. Not because it hurt, that part had already happened, but because now I could stop wondering. She wasn't figuring herself out. She was auditioning someone else, and I had finally seen the cast list. I didn't follow her, I didn't text her, and I sure as hell didn't call her out. That night, I drove home with both hands clenched on the wheel and a mind finally free from doubt. Everything I needed to know had already been answered, not in words, but in actions. In the way she looked at him, in the way she didn't look over her shoulder, in the way she wore someone else's hoodie like it was home. Amanda had made her choice. She just hadn't said it out loud yet. That's the part people forget. Betrayal doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes it arrives in whispers, in the quiet recalculations of someone slowly rewriting the story of us into the story of me and someone else. Still, I didn't react. I let the knowledge settle in me like dust on an old bookshelf. Not heavy, just still. I didn't rage clean the apartment or throw her stuff onto the front lawn. I didn't even touch the box I'd packed. I just waited. Because I knew she'd come back. They always do. Not because they regret, but because they want control over how it ends. They want to be the one who says, "I'm sorry," not the one who hears, "I'm done." They want to see if the door is still open. And I hadn't closed it. Not yet. A few days passed. The apartment stayed quiet. Her scent had mostly faded by then, replaced by the faint musk of solitude and reheated takeout. Then, one night, around 10 p.m., I heard it. Keys. Not a knock, not a text warning me ahead of time. Just the jingle of keys sliding into the lock, like nothing had changed, like she still lived here. The door opened slowly. Amanda stepped inside like she was walking into a dream she wasn't sure still belonged to her. She looked around, eyes darting to the couch, the dining table, the closed bedroom door. Then she saw the box. The cardboard one by the door. The one I'd labeled, Amanda, Final Pickup. Her face twitched, not in shock, but in recognition. She knew what it meant. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't anger. It was finality. "I was just coming to get a few more things," she said, voice soft, like she was afraid of disturbing the air around us. I didn't respond. She walked to the box, crouched beside it, fingers grazing the flaps but not opening it. I watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, heart silent. She glanced at me then, for the first time in weeks, really looked at me. "You okay?" she asked. I could have said a lot of things. Could have asked about the guy, the apartment, the silence, the hoodie. Could have said how cruel it was to leave and linger. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Do you need help carrying it to your car?" That made her blank, like she didn't expect civility, like she was bracing for a war and got a handshake instead. "No," she said, quietly. "I can manage." She stood up slowly, still looking at me like I was the stranger now. And maybe I was. Because I wasn't broken anymore. I was done. She picked up the box, hesitated, then toward the door. But I knew this wasn't her real return. This was the prelude. The real return would come when the newness wore off, when the shine of whoever he was started to dull, when comfort started to look better than chaos. And when she did come back, not for her things, but for me, she'd find someone else living in my skin, someone who had already learned to close the door. It didn't take long. 3 days after she picked up the box, she texted me.
Can we talk? I stared at the message for a full minute, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, standing in the middle of my kitchen like I had just been frozen mid-movement. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel curious. Mostly, I felt prepared. I didn't reply right away. In fact, I waited until the next morning. I simply wrote back, "Sure, you know where I live." No emoji, no warmth, no punctuation beyond what was necessary. She came that evening. Same keys, same soft steps, but this time there was no box to grab, no drawer to rummage through. She wasn't here to collect anything. She was here to see what was left. Amanda stood in the doorway longer than she needed to, like she was testing the temperature of the room with her presence alone. Like she was hoping I'd fill the silence with something, an invitation, an outburst, maybe even an embrace. I didn't. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Slowly, gently, like she was afraid something might break. I stayed where I was, on the couch, remote on the coffee table, one leg crossed over the other. Calm, still, but no longer the man waiting for her. She sat across from me, legs tucked under her like she used to when we watched movies together on rainy Sundays. But there was no closeness now, only air, thick, unspoken air. She didn't dive into it immediately. She waited, and when I didn't make it easier, she started. I didn't know what I wanted. I nodded, not to agree, just to let her know I was listening. I thought I needed space to figure myself out, to reset, but it wasn't about that. Not really. She looked down at her hands. I met someone. I didn't plan to. It just happened. Of course it did. That's how it always starts, with chance and choice wearing the same mask. He's not what I thought. I was chasing something, and I got it, and it felt exciting for a while, but then it didn't. I didn't say a word. I thought if I left enough here, I could come back and fix things if it didn't work out. I know how that sounds. I know it's selfish. Another nod, still silent. Tears didn't come yet, but her voice cracked a little now. That carefully rehearsed confession was unraveling. Her eyes finally met mine. I was wrong, she whispered, about him, about what I wanted, about everything. And there it was. The door creaked open again, but not with keys this time, with regret. I waited for more, for the part where she said she missed me, that she loved me, that she realized the truth too late and would do anything to undo it. But it didn't come. Instead, she said, I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry. And if there's any part of you that's still... I raised a hand. Not harshly, just enough. I heard what I needed, I said. She blinked, because this wasn't the conversation she had prepared for. She expected anger or begging or even an opening. But all I gave her was clarity. And for the first time, Amanda didn't know what to do next. Amanda sat still, hands clasped between her knees, eyes searching for the version of her she remembered. But he wasn't here. He'd gone missing around the time she left her perfume in the bathroom and her loyalty in someone else's apartment. The silence stretched. She looked ready to say something more, maybe a plea, maybe an excuse dressed up as vulnerability. But I didn't give her the space.
I'd given her enough of that already. "You want to know the truth?" I asked, my voice even, almost too calm. I knew. Her brows knit, confused. Knew what? I leaned forward slightly, elbows on my knees. "I saw you with him. The guy from the apartment in Lincoln Park, baseball cap, sloppy beard, hoodie that wasn't yours." She paled. Her mouth opened, then closed, like she'd forgotten how to breathe with guilt in her lungs. "I didn't confront you. I didn't follow you in. I didn't scream or throw your stuff out the window," I said, "because I didn't need to." I paused, letting the truth settle between us like dust in sunlight. "I watched you leave, over and over again, piece by piece, until you weren't here anymore, even when you were standing in front of me." Her throat tightened. I could see it, the way her body tried to hold back the tide, to preserve some image of herself she could still live with. "I gave you the space you asked for," I continued, "and you used it to test the waters, to try out someone else while keeping me warm on a shelf if it didn't work out." "That's not," she started, but I cut her off. "It is." I said it without anger, without volume, just certainty. And that, I think, cut deeper than shouting ever could. She looked down, blinking fast, her fingers twisting the edge of her sweater like they were trying to rewind time. But there was no time left to salvage. "What we had," I said, "used to be real, solid, maybe not perfect, but built on trust. And you broke that. Not with the guy, not even when you walked out, but when you tried to come back like nothing had happened, like I'd forget." Tears welled in her eyes now. Not for me, I think, but for the mirror I was holding up, for the image of herself she could no longer escape. I added, voice low, "That's the part that should scare you. Because anger means you still care. Anger means there's something left to fight for. But I wasn't fighting. I wasn't even holding the rope anymore." "I packed your things," I said, motioning toward the bag I'd repacked after she took the first box. "Everything that was left. Everything I didn't want to carry anymore." Her breath hitched. "Amanda," I said, sitting back again, "there's nothing here for you now."
She didn't move. Not right away. Maybe she was waiting for a loophole, a crack in the wall, a flicker of old emotion she could crawl through. But there wasn't one. Not this time. She sat there frozen, lips parted, eyes wet, like her body finally realized what her mind had been denying. This was not a conversation. This was a burial. Amanda had always been good with timing. She knew when to charm, when to cry, when to withhold just enough to keep you guessing. But this time, her performance arrived too late. The tears came now, thick, slow, unfiltered, not performative, not fake, real tears. But they didn't move me. I watched her try to speak, fail, then try again. A trembling hand brushed across her cheek like she could erase the moment along with the wetness. "I didn't mean to lose you," she whispered, voice cracking like old paint. "You didn't lose me," I replied. "You gave me up." And that distinction matters. It matters a lot, because loss is an accident, a misstep, a bad roll of the dice. But giving someone up? That's a decision. Her shoulders caved inward, like she was trying to make herself smaller. And for the first time in our entire relationship, Amanda looked powerless. "I thought I needed something else," she said. "Something more." I nodded. "Did you find it?" She looked away, jaw tight, eyes glassy. "No." And there it was, the quiet confession, the real reason she came back. Not because she remembered what we had, but because the fantasy she chased turned into a disappointment. The new guy wasn't better, just newer. And when the gloss wore off and the real world crept in, she realized she hadn't upgraded. She'd just traded in a home for a hotel room. "I made a mistake," she said, a little louder now. "I know that. I was scared. I thought maybe we were getting boring."
Boring. The word hung there like smoke, thick and impossible to ignore. You called it boring, I said. I called it steady. She closed her eyes, wincing like the truth physically hurt. I was stupid, she said, voice trembling. I let something good rot because I wanted to feel something exciting again. I didn't say anything. I just let her sit in it. Let her marinate in the realization that some things, once broken, don't glue back the same way, if they glue at all. Please, she said finally, voice barely audible. Tell me this doesn't mean it's over. And here it was, the moment she had rehearsed, the line she probably repeated in her head during every lonely car ride back from his place. But I didn't give her what she wanted. Not relief, not punishment, just truth. Amanda, I said, steady and quiet, you ended it the second you looked for more in someone else while still holding on to me. She shook her head, like denial would slow time. People make mistakes. Yes, I said, but not everyone leaves a safety net while they're making them. She cried then, full, heaving sobs, the kind that scrape your ribs on the way out. She covered her mouth, shoulders shaking, the sound muffled but heavy. And I didn't look away. I watched, because these weren't tears of remorse for what she'd done. They were tears of consequence. I didn't yell, I didn't break anything, I didn't storm out. Those are the endings people expect, the dramatic ones, where someone slams a door or screams into a pillow just to feel something. But this wasn't that kind of ending. This was the kind where one person sobs and the other simply accepts that the weight of love has already been lifted. I can fix this, Amanda whispered, her eyes swollen, voice hoarse from crying. We can fix this. Please, just tell me what to do. And that was the thing. It wasn't broken in a way that could be fixed. It had been replaced. She hadn't set our love down gently and walked away. She had swapped it out for something that felt newer, more thrilling. And when that thrill turned to static, she came back, hoping the comfort she abandoned was still warm. She didn't return for me, not really. She returned for what I represented: stability, forgiveness, home. And I wasn't hers anymore. I don't hate you, I told her, which seemed to cut deeper than if I had. She looked up, startled, tears still falling. But I'm done being the backup plan, I continued. I'm done being the man you fall back to when your new world turns gray. She shook her head. You weren't a backup. Yes, I said flatly, I was. That's why you left everything behind. That's why you let yourself float, knowing there was still an anchor here. You didn't burn the bridge. You just waited to see if the grass was greener, and when it wasn't, you ran back across it like nothing happened. She sobbed again, softer now, tired, broken. The way people cry when they know the chapter isn't just over, the book is closed. I'll do anything, she said. Therapy, counseling, moving, whatever you want. Just, please, don't let this be the end of us. And for a second, a brief, hollow second, I almost wanted to. Not because I still loved her, but because I remembered what it was like to. That's the trick grief plays on you. It doesn't bring back what you lost. It just reminds you how good it used to feel. But I didn't reach for her. I didn't soften. I didn't say maybe. Instead, I stood up slowly, walked to the door, and opened it. Not in anger, in closure. She stared at me, disbelief and heartbreak crashing across her face in waves. Her lips trembled, but her legs didn't move. It's over, I said, gently. You just got here late.
She stood, walked past me like a shadow. No fight left in her, no protest. Just a woman stepping into the consequences of a choice she thought wouldn't matter. The door clicked shut behind her. And the silence that followed wasn't painful. It was peace. It's strange how quiet can feel different depending on the context. 3 weeks ago, the silence in this apartment felt sharp,
like it was pointing fingers at me, whispering that something had been taken. Back then, every corner still held the ghost of her. Her coffee mug, her cardigan on the chair, the faint scent of her shampoo. Now the silence felt like air after a storm. Clean, still, necessary. Amanda never came back after that night. No calls, no follow-up messages, no desperate declarations of one more chance. And honestly, I think that silence was her apology, the only real one I'd ever get. She understood, finally, that I wasn't a phase of her life she could walk in and out of. I wasn't a man waiting for her to choose me after choosing someone else. I had always been the home she left for a hotel, and now the door to that home was locked. And I didn't feel bitter about it anymore. I felt finished. The next few weeks were simple. I donated her clothes, gave her old books to the library down the street, washed the bedding, replaced the toothbrush holder, and even bought new dinner plates. Not because I needed them, but because I wanted the apartment to stop looking like a museum of who we used to be. It took a while, but eventually, I started feeling something else. Relief. I could breathe deeper, sleep better. I stopped checking the time and wondering where she might be or who she might be with. I stopped rehearsing arguments in my head, trying to win a debate I never wanted to join in the first place. And then, something unexpected happened. I started looking forward again. Small things at first, making plans with friends, cleaning the apartment, not because she might visit, but because I wanted to live in a space that felt like mine. I reconnected with people I hadn't seen in months, laughed louder, took walks for no reason. And I met someone. Not in the way movies make it out to be, not dramatic or cinematic. Just a conversation at a coffee shop, a shared table, a short chat, a number exchanged. I wasn't looking, and that's probably why it felt easy. I didn't rush anything, I didn't overshare, I didn't bleed old wounds into new hands. But for the first time in a long while, I felt present. I think that's what betrayal takes from you more than anything, presence. It makes you live in the past, dissecting what went wrong, or in the future, dreading the next disappointment. But when you let it go, when you really let go, you get now back. You get yourself back. People always ask, would you take her back if she begged? No, not because I want revenge, not because I'm proud, but because I know now what I deserve. Loyalty isn't something you shop around, and love doesn't vanish when someone more exciting walks in. If it does, it was never love to begin with. She said she needed space, but it wasn't space she needed. It was someone else's attention, someone else's thrill. And by the time she realized what she gave up, it was already gone. Me? I started fresh, and I never looked back.